Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Generation 5 Shirogorov F95NL. I picked this up from Recon One. I did pay full price for it. I have no programs worked out with Recon One, but I will link them down below so you guys can check them out if you want to. Thank you so much to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and at TikTok at _metal_complex. So if you're not familiar with Shirogorov knives, they are expensive. Are they better than knives that cost $200, $300? Yeah, absolutely, right? If you've never handled a real Shirogorov, definitely. They're also, according to Shirogorov knives, entirely made in Russia. The most recent statement about that is that they do not outsource anything. So yes, that would be very, very expensive to do. So I bought this knife, and I'm a fan of Shirogorov knives, and I'm clearly an enthusiast collector. Does that mean that, does that mean you totally agree with the price tag, Metal Complex? Surely it does. No. No, I don't. But I want to make sure that that's clear right off the bat. I have handled a lot of knives. A lot. That's an understatement. I'm very familiar with budget territories, mid-range, high-end, custom, crazy, super exotic. I've handled knives that are thousands of dollars more than this, but I have a good grasp on this price point and who it caters to, right, and what's going into it. So I will talk about that price tag, definitely. But we're going to do the review first. Overall length here of this knife, I believe it's identical to all F95 models. We're looking at essentially 8.75 inches with a blade length of 3.85 and a cutting edge of, boy, yeah, the cutting edge is like almost 4 inches. That is wild. These knives and their ratios are just insane. Let's do some size comparisons. First off, let's put it up against my other F90. This is an F95 Zero. If you're like me, you're probably really confused by Shirogorov knives and what they call everything. And I can't explain it. There's a great video on YouTube from, I think it's FA Blades, where he goes over the different like letters and the different models and things like that. You should check that out. As far as I can tell, like the F95 is the F95 and there's a bunch of different variations. This is a Zero. I'm going to guess the Zero means there's nothing else going on. Like this is just the new version of the plain F95. The NLs, to my knowledge, have inlays, but it's confusing because past NL models were less expensive and had lesser materials in the blade, right? And were just like kind of more basic. But that's not always the case, apparently, because these two knives cost the same, and there's only one major difference outside of the finishing and the fact that it has an inlay, and that's that the blade stock thickness on the NL is thinner, which actually increases the cutting performance, right? This guy's kind of a fat boy. So, yeah, I don't know, guys. I always assumed NL was like, oh, it's like a cheaper version. Not always. Because this guy was really expensive, right? It's very beautiful, but yeah. So there you go. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against some knives that people are more familiar with. Any custom sales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. Up against the AD10 and the AD20.5. You can see here that this knife is much longer, not as robust, right? I think something that people can't help but do is equate value to potential durability, right? Without questioning exactly why they need that much durability. So the common knee-jerk reaction is, for that much money, it should be at least as durable as a cold steel triad lock. And the reality of that is that no, that's not the case. On top of that, the cold steel triad lock, I've always, mentioned, is an overkill lock that is incredibly durable, but everything else on the knife will break well before the lock does, in which case you just have a lock attached to some broken pieces of metal. And to get to that point, you would have to abuse the knife beyond any reasonable, like there's just absolutely nothing reasonable you'd be doing with the knife. So the reason I point that out is because there's a lot of people that have never heard of a knife costing this much. And without understanding this massive history in the knife world and this massive community and all the different things that go into pocket knives, you're left with what you know and what you assume. And what most people assume is that knives that are more expensive must be more durable, or they must somehow be substantially more capable, when in fact it's just not the case. A lot of times it's just how much is going into it, how much it costs to create, right? Even if those elements don't equate to utility, they do equate to value for certain collector enthusiasts, right? Who absolutely understand that what they're paying for are those elements that are not utility elements, right? Now, this will do nothing to mitigate those types of comments, but if you're new and it's a little bit difficult to kind of understand, right? At least you have a little bit more information there. Anyways, it is much longer than the Cold Steel 8010. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. And as you can see there, it is quite a bit bigger. It's amazing though, like it's not huge compared to the Spyderco PM2, but if you compare the amount of cutting edge on this thing, God, absolutely wild. There's really not that much more handle on the PM2, right? So it's really amazing how they pack this much blade into these knives. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action? I've heard Shirogorov knives have superior action. Holy moly, this thing is supreme. Ooh. The access to the lock bar. Listen, I love this guy, my F95, but it's always been a little bit tight. It has definitely broken in over time. When I got this thing, I was like, yikes. That was a tight pivot. But I just, instead of trying to adjust it, I just let it break in. This was the longest break-in period that I have ever experienced with a knife, was this big F95-0. But it is there. It is just about there. I think it's just about to be fall shut. Perfect. I've never had to adjust it. This guy came with absolutely perfect action. This is multi-row bearings. This is what Shirogorov is known for. This is not the same thing as a fall shut Civivi button lock that's just kind of loosey-goosey, right? There's a lot more that is going into this. This action will stay this way without, needing to adjust the pivot, an enormous amount of super often over an enormous amount of time. The action is also smooth, not just because of the weight and mass of the blade, but because of the surface that the bearings are riding on and because they are multi-row bearing. The end result here is something that visually is kind of hard to digest, kind of hard to put a finger on, but so often, the reason that you hear people go, yeah, I used to really turn my nose up at Shirogorov until I handled one, right? Not bought it. A lot of people say, that's just buyer reaffirmation, false reaffirmation after buying it. No, you'll hear this from people who go to shows and pick them up. And they go, whoa, right? Yeah, it is different. Absolutely. Is it, different enough to justify the price tag? Again, not quite. But is there a difference? Is it imaginary? No, it is not. Yes, there is a difference. Very much so. The D10 on these guys is freaking heavy. Holy crap. Wow. You really, so many times I do this. Oh, terrible. You really got to get after it, but that throw is really satisfying. Access to the lock bar is perfect. No double clutch. Just a beautiful, controlled, non-guillotine action. I don't like knives that have crazy finger guillotine action. I want it to be controlled and precise, and at the same time still lock out perfectly with no blade play, no lock stick, and be perfectly centered, which is the case here. Shirogorov knives are really, really precision, ultra beyond anything that I've ever experienced from the Chinese knife market. That's ultra precision. It's really great, and a lot of it is super complicated, but there's something about Shirogorov, and they just feel like they cranked it one extra time. So yeah, I really like it. They also, their designs are just beautiful. Let's go ahead and do carry profile, thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. Because this guy the blade stock is thinner, it actually is the whole thing just feels thinner, like in a meaningful way. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. This is a beautifully easy knife. It's one of the easiest knives to carry that has almost a 4-inch blade. And the fact that it is even thinner now in this NL Gen 5 makes it even easier to pop. I mean, it's so compact. Like, for how much blade you're getting, it's just ridiculous. Lengthwise, it's no longer than the PM2. In fact, it is identical in terms of handle length. It is definitely longer than the Para 3, but it's not as tall as either, even including the flipper tab. It does approach it, but not quite as tall. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and measure that blade stock thickness against this F95 So this guy has a blade stock thickness of 132 thousandths, roughly. I am right on that flat. And this F95 here is probably 155. Yeah, 154,000. So it is quite a bit thinner, right? Not super duper crazy thin, right? It's just, that's kind of like the middle of the road. And I really feel like it does that blade a lot more justice. I think this blade stock thickness makes a lot more sense. Not that this guy was a bad slicer or anything. This guy's just better. Let's go ahead and weigh it. There's definitely going to be a difference here because this bigger guy is full titanium that honestly I think has been milled out. Yeah. And then this guy is milled out only to accept. No, it's milled out on the inside too, but it's also cut out up here to accept these Technicarbo scales. So, wow, this is not right. And it's was it in pounds? We don't want to do that. So, in terms of ounces, this new guy, the NL Gen 4, actually weighs more than I thought, 4.37. You know what would be helpful is if you guys could see it. Let's put that back down there again. Okay, 4.41. Let's try that again. 4.4. Okay, 4.41 ounces. Not bad, considering it's got a 4-inch blade. F95 5 ounces. So they shaved more than half an ounce off this guy. Honestly, I thought it would be more like 3/4 of an ounce. But man, it really does feel like quite a bit lighter. I think it's also because it's thinner and the difference in like feeling the texture of the carbon fiber is just really throwing my senses. But pretty darn good ratios. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. Normally I'd get out my tools, which by the way are very convenient and very inexpensive. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use in this channel. But this is Shirogorov hardware. Proprietary hardware. I'd say it's more of a just get something that's similar to a flathead and you can turn it. You can buy the tool if you really want to. It'll fit perfectly. What I do is I take credit cards, like old credit cards, and just glue them together and then just shave down the pieces so I can make a plastic, rigid, sort of makeshift screwdriver. And if you keep sanding it down, right, you can actually make it to where it fits those heads perfectly. And if you ever need to adjust them, you definitely can. I have done this with almost every Shirogorov knife I own, save for the other F95 which I've been letting break in. But it is doable, right? It's a little bit annoying that you can't just use the Torx, but then again, like the Shirogorov pivot and the body screw, they're like iconic, man. This knife, the F95, is as famous and recognizable as the Chris Reeve Sabenza, or the Hinder XM18, or the Strider SNG, Demco 8020. Les George VECP, right? There's a bunch of knives in there that are Holy Trinity or very near Holy Trinity evergreen that are super recognizable. The F95 is that knife for Shirogorov, and I think a big part of that is the pivot. So I would say it's mildly infuriating that I can't just stick a T8 in there and turn it, but it is far from like being completely boxed out of disassembly by Shirogorov. I think people who say stuff like that are super dramatic. To those people, I would say there's a network you would love. It's called Lifetime. You should watch it right around Christmas. That is definitely your speed. To everybody else, try the credit card thing. It's pretty easy. Yeah, and there's only one. I mean, it's a captive. Well, actually, I don't think it's captive. I think it's just very tight tolerances. I've never had an issue with spinning right? But these will come out. I think it's just really tight tolerances. This is a Chicago screw, so there's only one head. Super easy to take apart and put back together. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Okay, meat and potatoes time. Wow, what a beautiful knife. I like this even better than my Zero because of the inlay, that Technicarbo inlay. That is some cool. Oh man, Technicarbo makes some super cool looking carbon fiber. This is some of the nicest looking carbon fiber I've ever seen, and it is milled out to perfection. The inlay is intentionally raised. If you're looking at shadows here and you're like, oh, this poor quality inlay work. No, it's intentionally raised and beveled, right? Which really highlights it within this area that they laid it in, right? They made a little bit of extra room for the screw back here. And it's just really nice. The lines on this knife in general are just super nice. I love that they have these milling lines here, right? And then this area is actually lighter. Like if you compare to the F95 where they just did the same everywhere. No, they kind of highlighted this area, this flat here, and made it shiny. Really nice contrast with the slightly textured Technicarbo, right? And then a nice contrast with the darker areas in the titanium here. I love what Shirogorov does when you transition from one part of the scale to like the backspacer. You can see the backspacer starts up here and slowly sinks into the back of the frame. I also really like areas like this. Look at how complicated this. They make room for the screw back here. This area is slightly raised and then comes out to this flat, which goes right into the beveled area of the back of the spacer. These areas back here where they have created essentially a really fancy port for the lanyard, if you want to put a lanyard back here. This is one of the only times that I really appreciate this area, and not because it lets me put a lanyard on the knife, because I'm not going to do that. I just really like it. Look at this. This is crazy. This whole... The amount of like design effort that went into this area of the knife is absurd. It's crazy. You know what most people do with this area is they go like the back of the PM2 on this. These are all Flightanium parts, which is fine, right? But it's just, God, there's a huge difference. It's just absolutely wild, man. Or like, here's some custom scales for the Ritter Hoe. That's fine. Same thing on the F95 here, the bigger one. It's just wild. I just am blown away at the lengths that Shirogorov will go to make sure that these areas are interesting. This is what I'm talking about, right? If you're new and you actually decided to invest, 18 minutes with me here on this review, you're like, you know what? There's no way that any knife can cost that much money, but I'm going to hear what this guy has to say. God bless you if you actually managed to do that in 2024, where paying attention to anything for longer than 30 seconds is almost impossible. God bless you. For real. Thank you for being here, right? But if you wanted me to explain some of those elements that I was talking about that are really, really impressive and that people will pay for, not everybody, but some people, collectors and enthusiasts, will pay for, that do not necessarily translate to utility or function, it's stuff like this. This is the type of stuff that gets some people interested. And it does cost more money to do. And it is more time consuming, right? People would argue if it doesn't equate to utility, then why do it? The answer is because there's a market. There are people who are willing to pay for it. There are people who are willing to do the work and create this type of stuff, create this type of complexity, knowing that their buying audience will be interested in specifically that. So another knee-jerk reaction to stuff like this is they're obviously trying to con people, or they're trying to trick people. No one's being tricked. The people who buy this stuff know exactly what type of stuff they want to buy, and the reason they want to buy it is, is because it's being built specifically for people like them, right? So I feel like that part of it is very transparent, but it appears initially on the surface as some sort of scheme or con. The fact is, the more you look into the knife world, the less that you find that is the case. While we do have that in some cases, this community is really good about sniffing that stuff out, and it generally doesn't fly. So anyways, that part of it is really cool. And wow, are these knives so comfortable. This is one of the most comfortable knives that I have ever held. The most comfortable knife, in my opinion, the best ergonomics ever are with the F95NS from Shirogorov, and the scales are contoured. The whole handle's a little thicker to accommodate for both the titanium liners and the carbon fiber scales. That's the only one that's a little bit more comfortable, but man, this thing is just beautifully comfortable. This is often referred to as the folding steak knife, and it does look like that. But the overall design is not only beautiful because of the machine work or the design work and the handle or the blade or the ratios. I lost my train of thought there. But it's incredibly comfortable and very nice to look at, I think is what I wanted to say. Which is not, you don't always get both, right? It's just beautifully comfortable and beautifully functional. The blade will definitely, that blade is made to cut. It's made out of M390, which honestly is a little bit disappointing. The only time they ever use S90V or Vanax is when they're doing like a special edition. And I really wish that they would offer S90V. Like, the whole knife world knows that S90V is not really all that crazy of a thing anymore. Shirogorov still operates as if S90V is like some limited resource that we have on this earth, and they like have a secret, they found like a secret deposit of it in the earth, and they're like slowly, making things out of it because it's like limited. It's not, right? You can get S90V and much less expensive knives, right? Not just Chinese knives, but it's just not it's not something that should be exclusive to their premium stuff. I really wish that they would use S90V more often. This is M390. It's fine. Shirogorov apparently does a good heat treat with M390, and the blade is definitely the right type of geometry to properly accentuate M390 with a good heat treatment. It will cut, and it will cut for a long time. The blade is definitely thin behind the edge, much thinner than on the F95 that I have. I once again have to complain about the jimping. This is essentially decorative jimping. It does not grip your fingers. I don't know why they've changed this. In the past, they had jimping that was much more similar to like the PM2, where it would actually catch your fingers. This doesn't really do that. So yeah, it's nice to look at, but I don't know why they would do it like this. So, okay. The blades on these do look slightly different. This one has this little cutout here that I always feel like I see in the NLs, and this one not really. So that's something else that's a little bit different there. The blade finish, I think on the NL it's slightly darker, just ever so slightly darker. It's like a very, very consistent tumbling. You can see the media marks, but it's really light. A little bit of, there's nothing, it's not discoloration on the blade. It's just like finger oil, but really consistent, really nice looking. Nice tip there, perfectly even bevel. And this one did come insanely sharp. My first F95, my first F3 ever came kind of dull. I sent that one back, and they sent me another one, and it was extremely sharp. That's the only Shirogorov I've ever received that was not incredibly sharp right out of the box, but this one is definitely as well. What else is there to say? The pocket clip is beautifully integrated into the titanium frame. Like, man, that is just a lot of effort for a pocket clip, and it really, really looks good. Look how they just left a little bit of that lighter area to highlight this area of the pocket clip around here. This whole, man, it's just nuts, man. This is the type of stuff, like from a distance, a Shirogorov knife just looks like a knife, right? You get this stuff up close, and man, they really do the extra. They really go the extra mile, and it's just awesome. Beautiful milled clip. Honestly, very functional. Plenty of depth in the carry there. We have a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop. We also have a stop pin, pretty robust stop pin with a slight amount of shouldering. Absolutely no blade play up, down, left to right. No lock stick, no double clutch, no pivot lash. Perfect action. Incredibly heavy detent. Some people are not going to like that, by the way, and it is absolutely perfectly centered. I love this knife. I think it's really cool. What I don't like is the price tag. That price tag is insane. I do feel like I got a better deal on this guy than I did this F95 This is just a thicker blade, and it was also $1,100. This knife feels exactly the same in overall quality. It just feels more complex with the inlays and the milling work. I mean, it would take more work to do this than to do this, right? So, yeah, this one definitely feels like a better deal, but it also doesn't feel like an $1,100 knife. Now, no matter what I say, there's always going to be people who say that this knife shouldn't cost more than $200 or $300, and that is so wrong. So no, absolutely not. It is not the same thing as your Chinese production titanium. Like, if you want that stuff, then go buy it. You can do that. The existence of this is not stopping you from buying nice Chinese titanium knives in M390. If it sounds like I'm arguing with somebody who isn't there, I promise you, these people are there in the thousands. To those people, no one is stopping you from buying that stuff. You have that option. You can go do it. For people who want the Shirogorov, they want this extra, right? This is real. There are real elements here that are more costly. And also, if this really is 100% made in Russia, like Shirogorov Knives claims, which no one's ever disproven, right? There's a lot of people who are like, I don't know, some of it seems like it might be outsourced. It's always, no, there's never been any evidence of that. As far as I know, these are really actually made there, right? So, you can find cheaper clones. Those exist, right? If you feel good about buying that stuff, then no one can stop you, right? But those aren't going to hold any value. That's the truth here, is that the reason that the collectors and enthusiasts go after this is because it is authentic. It has that little extra wow factor, right? That you just can't, it's just only in the authentic thing. They really do go out of their way to do crazy stuff like this whole area back here, right? Manufacturing in Russia is nowhere near as cheap as it is in China. The cherry on top to the enthusiasts and collectors who are the real buying audience for this stuff is that the real ones will hold their value and the fake ones won't. That's just how it is, right? Now, what you choose to do, which one you choose to go for, is entirely up to you. Whatever. But me personally, I wouldn't be caught dead with a fake one or a clone. I find that to be, gross. The only people that are really going to be impressed are the people who are going to know better, right? It's kind of like people who drive Dodge Chargers that are V6s and they buy that little Hemi badge and they stick it on the side. The people who know what the Hemi trims look like and what wheels are associated with that are the only people who would even care in the first place, right? So it's not really doing anything other than just scratching the itch for wanting to have a Shirogorov knife and not wanting to pay for the real thing, which again is entirely up to the individual, right? You don't have to report to me. It's not like I'm going to put your name up on a board that says shame, 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 this person bought a clone. No, you can do whatever you want. It's your money, right? But me personally, I'm going to buy the real thing. As somebody who did buy the real thing, how do I feel about that $1,100 price tag? Oh, man. No, I think that's too much. I think this is right around a $900 knife. It's about what I've always said. I don't agree with people who say these are $200 or $300 knives. I think those people are just full of crap. But based on what I have experienced, what I've handled, the real competition for Shirogorov knives, which I really feel like Herman knives are up there. I really feel like Hoghouse knives are up there. Koenig knives are up there, right? I really feel like this is much closer to those. I feel like that it's just for magical nonsense reasons that some of these are over $1,000. But it is definitely deserving of that ultra upper tier, those price points, right? So if you invest in one of these, it will hold much more of its value, right? How much of that? It kind of depends on the model and the availability, but Shirogorov knives tend to hold their value pretty well, unless they are clones, in which case nobody wants those. The real ones, definitely. So I like this knife. I like it enough to say it's one of my favorite pocket knives, so it's going to go in my favorite knives playlist. but it is not going to go in my recommended knives playlist because I honestly don't recommend it. I mean, it's freaking wildly expensive. Even if it was $900, you don't need to pay $900 to get a good working pocket knife, right? If you are an enthusiast and collector, you're obsessing over Shirogorov knives, you got $1,100 burning a hole in your pocket, right? And you love every last thing about this knife, then you should buy it. But for literally everybody else on the planet, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? So those are my honest thoughts there. But that's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.